Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Stump Short Podcast. Delighted to be joined today by Cricinfo's George Dobell. Hi, George. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today, George. News recently broken that the ICC is going to shelve plans for a two-tier test system. I stress the test bit, whether that changes on the one-day stuff, we don't know yet, but certainly disappointing news for a lot of people. What do you make of this decision by the ICC?
I think it's disappointing. Hugely disappointing, actually. I think it's probably another nail in the coffin of Test cricket. And from a parochial sort of English perspective, it's interesting that Colin Graves came in with all these plans, both domestically and internationally, and he's finding them thwarted at every turn. But the more important issue is that short-term self-interest has won the day again. I don't know what effect it's going to have at this stage on the countries that would have been introduced to Test cricket for the first time, notably Ireland and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't appear to do them any favours. And it's I don't think it's been done for the right reasons. And, I think it's very disappointing. I wondered one way around it, which is radical off the top of my head. I wondered if one way around it would have been for England to offer to go into the second division for the first period of time, which might have shown good intent and what have you. But I think it's really disappointing that this has happened. Yeah, it's still pretty fresh news, and we don't know whether it might be revived in due course. But basically, we thought that the BCCI were changing their character, and they weren't. It was just one chairman they had very briefly. He's now gone to the ICC. And they have reverted to the way they've always been, which is self-interest, which, to be fair, the ECD's been the same most of the time. But it is disappointing that we thought there was going to be a bit more change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've sort of hit it there. A lot of people hoped or thought there might be some kind of change or some sort of consensus to make a change in the near to mid future. Obviously, the Players Association were urging the ICC to adopt this system, and certainly some pretty significant players in the world game were behind it. Australia and England said they were behind it. South Africa, New Zealand. I thought significantly the West Indies said they supported the idea. But as you said, the BCCI, as they are such a big piece of that puzzle, and obviously Bangladesh have said they're delighted that the plans have been shelved. So kind of a two sides of the coin almost from Bangladesh and the West Indies, because both teams would have been Division 2, I think. And so quite interesting that they've made a decision, but it's just...
Yeah, I mean, they're missing the point a bit, and they wouldn't have been relegated to Division 2, and effectively there would have been a third division, because although they wouldn't have been playing Test cricket, there would have been a pathway for those teams in the Intercontinental Cup to eventually qualify as well. You don't have to look very far into the future to see a system where you could have had half a dozen divisions. Yeah. I don't know how many countries want to play multi-day cricket. I don't think it is much beyond 25 or so. But you could have looked into the future and just seen that it would have been a meritocracy.
Yeah.
And it's quite disappointing that Bangladesh, who probably owed their early elevation to some slightly dubious cricket played in the 99 World Cup, are pulling up the ladder on teams who come after them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's one that will have to be reflected on. England obviously go to Bangladesh shortly, and that's brilliant and exciting and all the rest of it, and a real challenge. But Bangladesh are going to now need to be treated, if this is what they want, they need to be treated for their monetary value in TV rights when they come to England. I mean, are they an attractive for England to host? I don't know the answer to that. But if it's not a meritocratic league system, what do they think is going to happen? Because it's going to be judged then on financial terms, and I'm not sure that does them any favours. So I think this is a foolish short-term decision on their behalf. And basically any league format that isn't governed on merit, I think, is doomed to failure. We've got a similar conversation going on domestically here, where some people are saying that the T20 divisions, if there were divisions of promotion and relegation, should be sorted on terms of capacity of ground rather than previous season's finish. And I think that's really flawed. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's pretty recent news, so I'm still sort of coming to terms with it, but it is very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think when we're talking now, the news only broke about just over an hour ago, I'd say. So, as you said, it is very fresh. But the idea, as you just said about Bangladesh, sort of pulling up the ladder, considering that sort of where they came from in, not really that long ago, in terms of joining the Test ranks, for them to, as you say, pull the ladder up like that is surprising. And it's disappointing for teams like Ireland and Afghanistan have made such great progress in such a short space of time. So to block that pathway is I think it's short-sighted. And
look, those teams, those countries can still be admitted to Test cricket, but the fact is there won't necessarily be a way for them to progress. There won't be a target. There won't be relevance in the same way that a league competition could have provided. And England would eventually, the history tells us, have got into the second division.
Yeah.
And maybe, and that would have been painful and financially difficult and all the rest of it. But I think you have to understand that those bad times make the good times better, and they add colour, context, relevance, whichever word you want to use, to the challenge. And actually, a promotion battle or a relegation fight could have been quite attractive to broadcasters. I don't know. I mean, clearly, I thought it was a decent idea, and I think that there is no room for complacency in terms of the viability of Test cricket. And this is a blow. I honestly think it's another nail in the coffin.
And also, as I mentioned before, FICA released some of the results of their survey. They urged them to. Well, certainly urge the ICC to consider this change, and obviously I call it the threat, for lack of a better term, of some of the big 2020 leagues. I was talking about ring fencing windows in the calendar for those tournaments to take place, so it doesn't clash with Test cricket. I know some people have been upset during the English summer that players, Joe Root, just for example's sake, has been off with England rather than playing for Yorkshire, and obviously that's an ongoing conversation really within our own borders. But yeah, it's. As we've said, it'll disappoint a lot of people in a lot of cricketing corners of the world. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you come back down to the same issues again and again. There's probably too much played. So people expecting Joe Root to squeeze in another Yorkshire game, I think, really need to have a look at his schedule. Because he couldn't give any more than he's giving. And I think he's already volunteered to play more for Yorkshire than is probably wise.
Yeah.
But, he loves it and he values it. Great. And more power to him for that. But you also have to respect when they need a rest. And sometimes you just need a mental break. And I don't think he's getting enough of one, to be honest. I think he's a real precious asset. England are hugely reliant on all three formats.
Yep.
If you played all three formats for England, you'll spend about 300 days a year in hotels. Now, I know that seems very exciting and glamorous. And it is, actually. It's wonderful in many ways, but it's also extremely draining.
Yeah.
And to be as good as he is, I think you probably need to be a little bit mentally fresh as well. So I'm not saying they should have lots of time off or anything, but I do think that people should cut him and the ECB some slack for the current decision that has been made about him not playing. I still wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if he insisted he did want to play, because I think his good intentions are pretty obvious. But sometimes I think probably need to protect them from themselves and their own enthusiasms. But so you've got self-interest and the amount of cricket being played as recurring themes, recurring issues. And what would be nice is if the governing body, the ICC, acted in a way, or was allowed to act in a way for the best interest of the entire game. That's what governing bodies should do. But of course, they're polluted by self-interest. Actually, they're better now than they were a few months ago. But the fact is that they're reliant on their members, and their members are filled with self-interest and political thoughts. The idea that the BCCI are trying to protect Bangladesh, I find is laughable.
Well, let's use that as a little bit of a segue, that section of conversation, into the future of, certainly 2020 cricket in England, because this feels like the elephant in the room all the time when you talk about domestic cricket here and what the future of 2020 cricket is in England. Obviously, Northampton won the 2020 Blast a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people are really thrilled for them as a team, but the whole idea of franchises just won't go away. And what do you believe the future of 2020 cricket in England is?
Well, I think it's important to be specific with the terminology, and I don't think franchises specifically are on the table, because I think the teams will remain in the ownership of the counties in the broader sense. So they're not going to be, it won't be the same model as India. It won't be the same model as the IPL, for example, but it might be a similar model to the Big Bash League. So, what do I think will happen? Well, I think it's very hard to say. There's a very vibrant debate going on at the moment about this direction. And I think it's going to come down to two options. And then option 4 of the current 5 options being circulated by the ECB is that there will be 2 leagues. There'll be a new team league, and there will be the continuation of the NatWest Blast, which will continue to happen. I think that's a poor plan, but it has won over a few counties. Off the top of my head, it's won over Notts, Yorkshire. I believe it's won over Sussex, which I regret bitterly, and one or two others who think that would work. Leicester as well, I believe. I think that if you have two competitions going on at the same time, that one of them will inevitably become known as the lesser secondary competition. You'll be cannibalising that competition, take the best players out of it. You'll be taking quite a lot of players out of Championship cricket, unless you have quite a big window for the Championship. So this is 3 or 4 weeks in July we're talking about, really. So either the best window for domestic T20 cricket will be denied to smaller counties, or the best window, possibly the best month for weather in the season, will be denied the Championship, or they'll continue with 100 of the best players taken out. Now, I don't think any of those solutions are great. No. The other option, which is possible, is that there's promotion and relegation in T20, with the broadcasters focusing more on the top division. The broadcasters, we are told, are less keen on that, but when we're told that, the ECB means Sky.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably doesn't, I think you introduced me as saying I work for ESPN. I think it's the world's largest sports broadcast. Yep. I don't think anyone asked us.
Yeah, it's...
I mean, I say that with some authority. I don't think anyone at the ECB has taken a great deal of time to ask what ESPN or BT Sport think.
And that's maybe the X factor in all this, is that we've certainly seen it in football. I think with BT coming in, obviously the money there has gone up exponentially. There's huge, ridiculous almost sums involved now. But there's other broadcasters around the world. I mean, the CPL has been shown here by 2 different broadcasters in 2 years. Also,
and by the way, Dave is what percentage of Dave is owned by the BBC or BBC Worldwide? 45, 50%, something like that. Which I think is relevant. Yeah,
and of course all the BBC radio coverage as well. There's still an interest there. Yeah. And then
I don't know how much of an interest. I don't know how much of an interest there is for those broadcasters. But I would think, one, they were worth wooing. Yeah, I would think they were worth a significant amount of time. And again, I'll say that some of those other broadcasters are bewildered by the closeness of the relationship between Sky and the ECB. English cricket hasn't been out to the free market since 2004, and I don't think it is going to be again now. I find that odd. I find that really, really odd. Just there's a couple of myths which I am hearing a lot. I hear that people don't watch television in the same way as they used to. I understand that. I've got 3 kids aged between 17 and 21.
Yeah.
I understand that broadcasting habits have changed somewhat. Had you told me 5 years ago that the show on betting was going to become very popular and draw tens of millions, I believe it had 10, 11, 12 million viewers in the last week, I would have been shocked. But what can still happen if you put TV shows on a free-to-air platform is that it can still draw a huge amount of enthusiasm. So it is a myth that people have completely stopped watching television in the same way. It is a myth that the ECB keep repeating because they keep wanting you to believe it.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it suits them. Now, the other myth is that the Sky pump the English game full of money. Do you know how much money they give the English game a season? A year?
Nope.
About 65 million.
Okay.
About 65 million. How much do they give the bottom club in the Premier League? What do they get for their TV revenues?
I
The
mean,
bottom club in the Premier League will get 90 odd million,
yeah,
maybe
it's
more.
pushing 100 million. I know that.
So when you're told about how grateful we should be for the money that Sky are putting into the game, it needs questioning.
Yeah, there's an asterisk against it.
I don't want to say that their coverage is entirely bad by any means. I think aspects of it have been absolutely fantastic. But the problem is it's fantastic if you can afford it. And with the game not really played in state schools, with the game not really visible on TV, with the game possibly disappearing from country towns and smaller cities, it is becoming invisible.
Yeah.
And the ECB can't keep playing to the lowest common denominator, which is cash, as their excuse for these decisions, because I think the game is dying. I really do. I think, and there's so much good about it. That the product actually is as good as it's ever been.
Yes.
The English teams are as good as they've ever been. We're producing more or as good players despite all the obstacles. All those things are very, very encouraging. This could be turned around. It's still a great game, but we need the oxygen of publicity. And the domestic T20 competition could do that. The current domestic competition could do that. And actually, I thought the Northants win was kind of inspiring.
Yes, absolutely.
This tiny club with no money, still producing England qualified players. Ben Duckett, there's David Willey, there's Ollie Stone, who's sort of below the radar, but I think he could become a very fine player. So they're doing an awful lot right as a cricket club, but an awful lot wrong as a business. There's actually quite a lot to be positive about if we just get a chance to show people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a passionate believer that the 18-county 2020 tournament, whether it be called the Blast or something else, could be successful. I think it needs some tweaks here and there, and there's bits that could be improved.
Yeah, so do I. But just on that, I think the spectator numbers have risen by 300% in 3 years.
And that says a lot. And I think it was at Somerset were one of the teams that pretty much regularly sold out as well, weren't they, this year?
Yeah, I think they had 98, 99% ticket sales
and if you
this season.
Move to a different format where they're, I don't want to say lost or they're a lesser team in a wider competition, what happens to cricket in the sort of the southwest? And
right.
If you haven't got that sort of team, and again, I apply the same to the northeast sometimes when people say, well, there wouldn't be again, it's not necessarily going to happen, but like a franchise, there wouldn't be one in Durham because.
They wouldn't, no.
And so you've got, in the furthest north you then go is Leeds or Manchester.
Okay, so they are a classic example of what we're talking about. So Durham, again, they've kind of failed as a business, haven't they?
Yep.
But as a cricket club,
they
have succeeded tremendously. They produce players. They're competitive on the pitch. We've been reliant on their bowlers. I mean, if all they had ever done was produce Ben Stokes and Wood, they would have done a great job. But they have two of arguably the most exciting cricketers in the world now,
definitely.
Have come through their system. And so they need supporting. So it seems odd to me that we're in a situation where they are desperate for survival, and yet the ECB has reserved for more than £70 million. This problem, and the amount of money they are in debt really doesn't add up to a huge amount. 4 or 5 million, yeah? I mean, it's a significant amount of money, and you can't continue to bail them out, particularly if they're not a members club. But clearly they're doing quite a lot right there. And actually the business aspect of the sport should exist to support the cricket aspect of the sport. It should be about playing cricket rather than making money. And I think we've got that a little back to front at present.
Yeah, and of course, before Wood and Stokes, we had Harmison and Collingwood, and Harmison was a huge part of the England side for several years.
And Onions,
of course. I always forget Onions, and of course he was such a great bowler, and injuries.
Selectors.
Yeah, well, he had a few injuries, but again, a great talent, and they consistently are producing players who are
that's right. And
international quality.
You don't have to play to England to be worthwhile. Someone like Scott Borthwick's only obviously played one test. But he's contributing to the success of English cricket even now by stand up in the county championship. Actually, argued that he was there. Now, I'm not completely anti-Colpacks or overseas players or anything like that. I think there's a balance, and actually Durham, the club with the balance, they've got the balance pretty much right.
Yeah, and they've won the championship 3 times in a relatively short lifespan as well. So they've had success. It's not as if they've been bottom feeders in the championship. They've been successful on the field, and they've produced England players. And as you said, it's strange that that would almost be, I want to say frowned on, maybe that's the wrong word, but the financial situation is publicly, everybody knows it's kind of precarious to be maybe polite about the situation. But it's mind-boggling that the ECB don't want to help them, given their location, given their success in producing players and on the field.
Here's a thought. Bear in mind they've only been in existence 25 years or whatever it is. What would happen if there were more clubs? What would happen if we were able to afford, say, a first-class county in, I don't know, North Wales or Cornwall or Cambridgeshire? I don't know, someone like that. Somewhere which isn't massively well represented.
Yeah.
You just wonder how many players are still slipping through the net because, as I say, we're very, very reliant upon the public schools. Mainly the public schools, but people born abroad, and of course people from an Asian background where cricket is still seems to be more part of the culture. So we're reliant on actually quite a small section of society, and you wonder what more talent there is out there.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting point. I mean, I'm based near Peterborough, so I'm North Cambridgeshire, and for me, the nearest grounds are Nottingham, Northants and Leicester are all about 90 minutes, and then Derby and Chelmsford are a couple of hours given traffic.
Right.
Which is fine for me because my uncle and my dad were huge cricket fans, so they got me into it, and we all go to games. But
there's Fenners.
There is, of course, yeah. And I think that's an annual trip for my dad and my uncle every year. They try and make that their first trip of the season every year. But for your average sort of sports fan, even say, are they going to want to travel 90 minutes to Trent Bridge? Maybe some might for an international game or maybe a 2020 quarter-final, but that's one of those hurdles. I think if it's like, well, I could drive 90 minutes or I can go to the local cinema and watch, the latest Star Wars or whatever's out. And that's sort of, it's one of those challenges I think the sport faces is competing within not just the sporting marketplace, but maybe the entertainment marketplace as a whole.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And particularly with it not seeming terribly important and with there being very little public face. As I say, I think the BBC commentaries are fantastic. There has been some great work done in terms of putting clips and highlights on Twitter. But these things tend to be for those people who already have fallen in love with the game. And I don't know, how old are you?
I'm 32 now.
Okay, so I'm 44. So the gateway drug for me was the Sunday League, BBC Two. It was on for years and years, every Sunday in the summer. You would have, sometimes with only one camera, but you'd have cricket on BBC Two on Sundays in the summer, and it was marvellous. That's certainly how I fell in love with the sport.
Yeah.
And the worry would be that we will not reach a new generation of supporters and players unless we make it a little bit more visible.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I like some of the stuff they've done online because I think that's the right way to approach it. And it's there. Make use of things like Twitter and Facebook and the ability to do video. And I love what Nottinghamshire have done, pairing up their video feed with BBC Nottingham's audio. So all right, it's a fixed camera, but you are able to watch the game through the Trent Bridge website, which is a brilliant step. But you seek that out because you want to. It's not something that's just there on a even a Thursday lunchtime. So it is difficult, and I think this is maybe something that touches on the problem the Women's Super League had because Sky own all the rights. They couldn't get on TV when they were desperate to get some exposure this summer. But just to move on, George, another area I think that popped up in the last 24 hours where cricket hasn't helped itself was at the Oval, where Surrey and Hampshire went off a bad light 3 times during play, despite it being at the Oval with some of the best floodlights and a pretty decent crowding, because Surrey do pretty well on their attendances. I mean, Liam Dawson was bowling for 2 of the occurrences when they left the field. It just seems like madness to me.
Yeah, look, I wasn't there. It's not a new thing, is it?
Nope, certainly not. Unfortunately,
I do think that people have become a little bit more intolerant about it, which is not a bad thing. Genuinely, I mean, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because I thought that there was people were a bit blasé in the past. Look, so I wasn't there, so it's very hard to talk about the specifics. As a general rule, I think the game is run too much by people who've played the game professionally.
Yeah.
And by that I mean that the voice of the spectator is not heard enough.
Mm.
And what you tend to find is that nearly everyone involved in cricket administration has forgotten what it's like to pay for a ticket, to take time off work, to be disappointed, to sit in the sun, sit in the wind, sit in the rain, be fleeced for a bad pint of beer, fleeced for bad food, and then be shortchanged by them not getting through the overs.
Yeah.
And we all get blasé about that. So I think long term, this is not addressing your specific point. I can't really because I wasn't there.
No, it's fine.
But as a general rule, I think that it would be great if there were a supporters association and if there were a member of the ECB board who were elected by that supporters association to think that supporters... Here's a great example for you. At the moment, we're in the middle of a T20 process of consultation.
Yep.
The ECB has spoken to the counties. The ECB has spoken to the broadcasters, supposedly. The ECB has spoken to the players and the sponsors.
Yep.
Who haven't they spoken to? Bloody spectators. Yeah, because they won't give them the answers they want.
Yeah.
But, if it's a spectator sport, you have to respect them a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, they're the people who buy the tickets, the season tickets, the
keep
replica
us
shirts.
All employed.
Yeah.
It's indirect in many ways, but they keep us all employed.
Yeah.
And I think we have all got to be more mindful.
I think
you do get a bit blasé. I mean, I do because I watch cricket every day, really.
Yeah.
Almost every day of my life. Certainly, a hell of a lot. And you forget what it's like to come and watch one day.
Yeah.
And that day to be ruined. You just put that down as a bad day at work, I guess, from my perspective. But we shouldn't, should we? We should think what it's like for the kid who's on their first day at a game and could be put off for life by a dog ordinary pitch where people score at 2 and over all day. It's stodgy and there are very few boundaries. And I'm sorry if that noise of my phone ringing is coming across for you. I fear I'm late to see somebody. But yeah, I think it's something that we should all remind ourselves all the time. And I'll say again, one of the key problems with cricket is that it's run by cricketers. I mean, you want their voice, of course you want the player's voice, the ex-player's voice, of course you do. But you want it to be balanced with the spectator's voice. And the spectator's voice, honestly, I think they're seen as the necessary evil. The last time there was a T20 consultation about, domestic T20 anyway, which I think was in 2012, they decided, it was a huge consultation, they said they wanted appointment to view cricket. So basically cricket on Friday nights. We've had cricket on Friday night.
Yep.
Attendances are growing by 300%. Hey, they don't want it anymore. So they're not going to ask spectators what they want this time. That's a scandal. It's a bloody scandal.
Yeah, especially when it seems to be working as well. As you said, the attendances keep going up significantly. And they want to, as I said, this bit's like.
Well, do you know where they're not going up? They're not going up at the bigger ground. So they've gone up. The Taunton capacity, Chelmsford do very, very well. I think they're at capacity, actually.
Yeah.
Sussex do pretty well. Gloucestershire, I believe, went up by 25% this year, ballpark anyway. Surrey do brilliantly. Middlesex do very well. Some of the big clubs who want change do very poorly. Warwickshire, for example, I think their figures went up 5% this year, which is 5% below their target and substantially below what they should be getting. And Worcester went up very well as well. So what can happen is that in a small ground with a sense of intimacy, you really get to feel you're part of the game. You feel you're on top of the players. Your local heroes are right in front of you. You can reach out. You can feel the atmosphere build. It's one of the big mistakes they're making at Leicester, by the way, in that the playing area is too big. They have got like a test playing area and a county or even club infrastructure around it, seating. So it's quite hard to build a great atmosphere. Anyway, I think they're aware of this and will take steps to improve it. But actually, T20 doesn't have to be played in huge stadiums. It could work brilliantly if it's played, in intimate grounds where you kind of feel more part of the action.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I don't know, as you said, it's strange that they don't want another consultation, even just to get that feedback from spectators, because there are people there who will.
It's not strange. It's not strange. They don't want it because they know what it'll say.
Well, no, yeah.
Because they'll say what they said last time.
Yeah. No, you've got me there. But it's very frustrating. Let's try and end on a positive, George. I think it's been a pretty good season all in all for the Championship. There's been plenty of great storylines. Yorkshire and Middlesex battling it out for the Championship. Unfortunately,
yeah, and that's going to go to the last game at Lord's, isn't it? I mean, you would think. I can't see how it won't actually. Which is fantastic.
And then a great campaign.
And it's a really high standard. It's a really high standard. And the guys coming into the England teams are very, very good. You know, England are very competitive, very exciting in all three formats of the game. That's got to be a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that this is the frustration that there's so much good going on, and I wish we could shout about it more. Look, the game's dying. When I started, I'm at the Trent Bridge now. Yeah, I'm just wandering around the ground in case there's noise.
Yeah.
But there are two news. Well, there's the Times here and there's the local newspaper here.
Yeah. Matt Davies from the Nottingham Post.
And he is a gem. That guy is an absolute gem.
Yeah.
They are so lucky to have him. And it's very rare. Now, his job will be under threat all the time, as a cricket writer anyway, because he works for Trinity Mirror. I used to work for Trinity Mirror. Birmingham Post and Mail days, and they got rid of their cricket writer, which was me. So I suppose I should declare some bias right here. But basically, right around the country, you're seeing a local paper getting rid of very, very good cricket writers.
Yeah. Because
they'll tell you, Mark Eccled at Derby, for example, who is no longer going to games. Stuart at Durham, fantastic journalists, those two. And it's a comment that I'll have missed some, but it's happening right around the country. And because of that, you're starting to see very little cricket coverage in local papers.
Yeah.
The more that happens, the more the game diminishes in the public consciousness, the more it becomes irrelevant. Now, you know, I'm very lucky to work for an organisation that really believes in free cricket journalism.
Yeah.
And but you can't replace the knowledge of these guys like Matt and Stuart and Mark, who know far more about their counties than we ever will.
Yeah.
And they're doing really great jobs. Because cricket is a bit of a niche sport, it can't get the figures of football, and these very short-sighted companies are just deciding to write stories about footballers on holiday and, you know, a squirrel that goes up a bird feeder on Twitter, you know, this sort of crap. But that's the way that both journalism and cricket is going. And unless we actually act to change it, it will only go in one direction.
Yeah.
But I say again, it's all reversible because the game remains fantastic. It remains as entertaining as it's ever been. And as high quality, actually, at the top level.
Yeah.
You know, I went to a Division 2 match the other day. With the first full game, Division 2 I've seen this season, I did a bit of Leicester. Sorry, a bit of Worcester, Gloucester in the season. And it was a really good standard. Essex v Leicestershire, this is.
Yep.
It was a really, really good standard. Essex are a club that's doing everything right. They're full of young English qualified talent, absolutely bursting with it. And, you know, it looks they're going to go up. It was really quite heartening. And so there's lots of room for optimism. There really is. But we've got to tell people, we've got to let people know how good it is. We've got to believe it. And, you know, I wonder if the people running English cricket, I wonder if they like it quite as much as they should and quite as much as some of us who watch it. I'm not at all sure that Tom Harrison does.
Well, George, thank you very much for your time today. It's been fantastic to have you on and gather your thoughts.
Sorry, I feel I've ranted. Absolutely. For 20 minutes or whatever it's been.
No,
it's incoherent.
It's entirely why I started this podcast, because there's so many great people out there covering the game at to different degrees. I've had Matt Davies on the podcast before a couple of weeks ago.
Good. He's very, very good.
Because I mean, Matt, I've dealt with through ice hockey as well, because he covers the Panthers in Nottingham. So, and in one of my other hats is the ice hockey in the UK. So I've come across Matt, as you say, he's a fantastic guy. Does a great job at the Nottingham Post, and long may it continue on that front. But no, it's been great to have you on. So gather your thoughts. It's kind of why I do the podcast, really, to get all different perspectives and speak to a lot of great people around the game. So thank you very much for taking the time to join me today, George.
Huge pleasure. Okay, speak another time.
Thanks, George. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.